Imagine you've just returned after 2 days of visiting your sister, a trip arranged by your own son and daughter-in-law. But as you step into your house, your heart nearly stops. The TV, the refrigerator, the chairs and tables, all gone. The keepsakes you cherished your entire life, gone. On the table, only a few family photos remain, deliberately left behind as mockery, along with a cold letter. "Thank you, Mom, for giving us everything. You don't need it anymore." What would you do when the thieves are not strangers, but your very own son and daughter-in-law? Hello, everyone. My name is Eleanor, and I'm 67 years old. Time spares no one. My fingers are thin and calloused from decades spent bent over an old sewing machine. My hair is now completely white, impossible to dye, and my eyesight has grown blurry, struggling to distinguish even the smallest stitches. I've lived alone in a small house on the outskirts of the city for nearly 30 years, ever since my husband died in an accident. Back then, my son, James, was only 15 years old. And by the way, if you're watching this video, hit the like button and subscribe. I want to see just how far my story can go. Don't forget to drop a comment telling me where you're tuning in from. I'm really curious. I told myself I would be both father and mother, raising him into a man. And I did just that, trading away my youth, my sweat, countless sleepless nights, all for the sake of his smile and his education. This house, to me, was never just a home. It held all my memories. The photograph of James on his graduation day, the paintings my husband bought when he was young, and the old armchair where I used to cradle my son every evening. That morning, I was still at my sewing machine, finishing a sweater for the neighbor's child. The early sunlight filtered through the thin curtains, laying golden stripes across my trembling hands. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. I stood up slowly, thinking it must be Mrs. Linda from next door bringing some vegetables to trade. But when I opened the door, my heart skipped. Standing there was James, alongside his wife, Olivia. James wore a pale blue shirt, looking handsome, but I noticed a flicker of tension in his eyes. Olivia was beautiful, composed, dressed in an elegant floral dress. Her smile bright, yet strangely cold. They rarely visited in the mornings like this, so I was both surprised and delighted. "Mom," James said quickly, "Olivia and I just heard some news. Aunt Rosa is sick. She's very weak, and we think you should visit her. We already bought your bus ticket. It leaves at noon today." I froze. "Rosa? She's sick? Why didn't I hear anything?" Olivia tilted her head, her voice sweet yet laced with pity. "Maybe she didn't want to worry you. But this time, her health is really poor. Seeing you would make her so happy." Hearing that, my heart tightened. It had been so long since I'd seen my sister, and I always carried guilt for not being able to care for her more often. Now, hearing she was ill, I felt torn with worry, but also warmed by the thought that my son was looking out for me. "You already bought the ticket?" I asked, my eyes misting. "Yes, Mom," James nodded eagerly. "We want you to go, while there's still time. The bus leaves at noon. Just pack a few things. We'll take you to the station." In that moment, I felt young again. So James still cares about me, I thought. Olivia, too, cares for family. Maybe I've been worrying for nothing. I went into my room and opened the old wooden wardrobe. I pulled out the wool scarf I'd knitted last winter, planning to bring it to Rosa to keep her warm. I picked a few bright red apples from the basket, the kind I usually saved for special occasions. Every little thing I packed came from genuine love, from a naive hope that this was a chance to rekindle family bonds. Out in the living room, James and Olivia sat waiting. I didn't notice the glance they exchanged, a quick, secret look that later I would recognize as deceit. At the time, I was too busy wrapping the apples. My heart swelled with gratitude. My son still thinks of me and of his aunt. There is still kindness in this world. I put on my brown cardigan, draped a shawl over my shoulders, and picked up my small cloth bag of gifts. James came over to hold my arm while Olivia flashed a gentle smile. "Let's go, Mom, before we miss the bus." I squeezed my son's hand, my heart brimming with an emotion I hadn't felt in years. For the first time in so long, James seemed tender and attentive again. I had no idea that the very step I took out of that house that morning would lead me straight into the darkest nightmare of my life. The bus began to move, groaning with the familiar rattle of an old vehicle that had been in service for many years. I sat by the window, clutching a small cloth bag on my lap. Inside were the wool scarf I had knitted and a few red apples. James sat beside me, while Olivia chose a seat across the aisle. The midday sun filtered through the glass, casting its light on my son's face, the same face I had cherished for so many years, now grown sharp and dignified. "I wonder how Aunt Rosa is doing," James said suddenly, his voice carrying a hint of worry. Olivia immediately added, her slender hand resting on her husband's arm. "I just hope Mom gets there in time." With older people, illness can take a turn so quickly. My heart tightened at her words. I gripped the bag's handle, eyes misting. Yes, poor Rosa. I haven't been able to care for her all this time. "Don't blame yourself, Mom." James turned toward me, his voice softer now. "Just your being there will make her happy." His words warmed me. I turned to look out the window, watching the rows of green trees slide past, and felt an unfamiliar sense of comfort. So my son still cared. He still remembered Aunt Rosa, still worried about his mother. Maybe I had been too harsh, thinking he only cared about his job and his wife. During the trip, James and Olivia chatted cheerfully about visiting Rosa and about the days when James used to spend his childhood summers at her house. Olivia would sometimes take my hand, smiling kindly. "Don't worry, Mom. We've taken care of everything. All you need to do is stay healthy. Just seeing you will make Aunt Rosa happy." I nodded, my eyes stinging. It had been so long since I'd heard such simple words of concern. After so many years living in silence, with only the sound of the sewing machine and my own weary breathing, having my children arrange a trip like this to visit my sister filled me with a quiet happiness. The bus stopped in a small town after more than an hour's ride. James helped me down, and Olivia carried the cloth bag. Before us lay low houses and a dusty, sunlit road. Olivia glanced at her watch and clicked her tongue. "Oh no, I almost forgot. I have an urgent meeting in the city this afternoon. James, take Mom to Aunt Rosa's house, but we'll have to head back right away." My eyes widened. Leave right away? But what about Rosa? James lowered his head, his voice tinged with guilt. "Mom, Olivia, and I really need to get back to work. But you should stay with Aunt Rosa for a couple of days. She'll be more at ease having you there." I hesitated. A part of me wished they would stay with me, but another part reasoned that their work was important. And I'm old now, I can't do much, but at least I can take care of my sister. "That's right, Mom," Olivia chimed in, her smile gentle, though her eyes flashed with firmness. "We'll be back as soon as we finish, to bring you home." I sighed softly, then nodded. "All right then, you two go." "I'll stay with my sister for a couple of days." James put his arm around my shoulders and whispered, "Thank you, Mom. I knew you'd understand." They brought me to the house of an acquaintance, where Rosa was staying. My sister, frail and weak, still managed to smile when she saw me. Relieved, I sat beside her, beginning a heartfelt visit that I believed my son had thoughtfully arranged for me. When I turned around, James and Olivia were already waving goodbye, walking briskly back to their car, leaving a trail of golden dust in the air. I stood there for a while, staring after them, my heart swelling with simple gratitude. My son still remembers his mother, still values family ties. I truly am fortunate. The 2 days I stayed, I was constantly by my sister's side, reminiscing about old times. I even silently thanked James and Olivia, thinking it was because of them that I had this chance. I even told Rosa how lucky I was to have a son and daughter-in-law who were so thoughtful to arrange this trip. 2 days later, I said goodbye to Rosa and headed back. On the bus back to the city, the warmth from her thin hand still lingered on mine. She told me, "Call me when you get there." I nodded and sat quietly, staring through the dust-fogged window. The country road kept receding, replaced by rows of tightly packed houses, jostling shop signs, and a tangle of car horns like an invisible net. I silently thanked James and Olivia for arranging the trip and reminded myself maybe I'd misjudged them. My son still thinks of his mother. When I stepped off at the station, the city wind hit my face, carrying the smell of exhaust mixed with the scent of pastries from a street cart. I clutched my cloth bag, the same bag I'd taken with me, now holding only a wool scarf and a few leftover apples. The familiar alley leading home was dry with sunlight today, the light slicing into strips across the cracked cement. As soon as I turned the corner, I saw my house's old tiled roof, still the same, the hunched back among everyone else's freshly painted homes. I exhaled in relief and quickened my pace. Then I stopped short. The wooden door was ajar. I remembered so clearly that before I left, I'd pulled out the key, turned it twice, and tugged once. My back went cold, as if someone had pressed an ice slab against it. A draft slipped through the crack, making a thin whistling sound like a blade cutting. This is bad. Did someone break in? I swallowed, gripped the bag strap, and pushed the door open. The damp smell of old, whitewashed walls hit me, but the familiar sense of laundry powder, freshly brewed tea, and the medicated oil I rub on at night were gone. The living room opened up like a black mouth with no tongue. I stood on the threshold for a few seconds, my eyes trying to find something to latch onto. The TV was gone. The wooden shelf was sleek and bare, exposing a rectangular patch of dust, dark and light. The fridge was gone. The kitchen corner was a blotchy wall with the outlet showing 2 black holes like the eyes of dead fish. The old table and chairs, where we used to gulp down quick meals, had vanished, leaving 4 faint table leg marks on the floor. I stepped in, each footfall sounding a dry thud. On the walls, the spots where pictures used to hang now looked like windows that had been plastered over, leaving pale outlines and a few unfilled nail holes. The house's open wounds. My hand lifted on instinct to straighten a frame, but my fingers met only a cold, smooth patch of wall. Truly gone. My heart pounded up into my throat. The first thought flashed like a spark. Call the police now. I've been robbed. I fumbled in my dress pocket for my phone, my ears buzzing with my heartbeat. A jumble of images skittered through my head. Burly thieves in baseball caps, a truck pulled up in the alley, them hauling things out, the neighbors unaware, or knowing but reluctant to get involved. Would they come back? There's nothing left to take. I turned toward the wooden table in the middle of the room. Gone too? Number. The table was still there, but as lonely as a rock left behind when the tide goes out. On it, a few family photos were scattered. They'd been tossed aside like worthless scraps. A film photo of my husband and me when we were young, a thin scratch running across the corner of my smile, James holding a bouquet on graduation day, his eyes bright, me in the worn wine-colored dress. The picture I used to keep by the vase. Those photos seemed to cling to the tabletop, refusing to be carried off with everything else. In the middle of them lay a sheet of paper folded in half. I reached for it. My hand trembled as if a faint current were passing through it. The paper wasn't thick, yet it weighed like a stone. I opened it. The handwriting was firm and familiar. It was James's. Thank you, Mom, for giving us everything. You don't need it anymore. Please consider this our belated wedding gift. James and Olivia. I heard a tiny snap in my chest, like a button being yanked off. My legs went weak and I sank onto the edge of the chair. The paper shook violently in my hands, the writing seeming to dance before my eyes. Not burglars, not strange faces. My son and his wife. A hot rush swelled up and then drained away, leaving my whole body cold. In my head, the words, "Thank you," repeated like a taunting refrain. "You don't need it anymore," like a verdict stamped in red, striking my name from the ownership of what I had. I don't need it anymore. Then what do I need? A white wall? A bare wooden table? A few yellowing photos? Or the shame I'll have to swallow every time a neighbor drops by? My fingers crumpled the paper. Call the police. The thought resurfaced. I could dial 911 and say, my things were taken. But what would I say when they asked, "Do you suspect anyone?" Would I really say my son's name? I imagined the officer's eyes, surprised, then cooling as he took notes. I imagined them going to James's place and handcuffing him in front of people. Suddenly, my throat closed. Whatever he'd done, he was still James. The child who used to sleep on my chest, his head heavy and warm, smelling faintly of milk. I set the letter down, not out of forgiveness, but because I no longer had the strength to hold it. I swept the photos together with my hands, like gathering still glowing coals from a dead fire. A picture of 9-year-old James looking up at the camera, front teeth missing, holding the kite I'd mended with red thread. A photo of my husband standing by our newly bought refrigerator, smiling as he said, "From now on, we won't have to worry about food spoiling." The graduation photo, James hugging the bouquet, leaning in to whisper, "Thank you, Mom." Those 2 words that once felt soft as cake, now hard as stone. My tears fell, not in a rush, but one by one, with space in between. They landed on the old film photo, streaking it like rain on a window. I wiped them with the back of my hand, smudging my own smile even more. I wanted to cry out, anger, blame, or my child's name, but only a rasp came from my throat, like a door hinge that hadn't seen oil in years. I stood and walked a slow loop through the house like someone assessing storm damage. In the kitchen, habit made me reach to open the fridge. My hand met emptiness. I turned on the faucet. Water ran ice cold, silent. On the floor where the dining table had stood, faint circles from the legs still pressed into the tile. I knelt and slid a finger through the strip of dust that had been spared, as if I could touch the ghosts of the furniture. In the bedroom, the nightstand remained, but the jewelry box was empty, only a few safety pins and a chipped button rolling around inside. I went back to the living room and sat on the one remaining low wooden chair. The house suddenly echoed more than usual. Even my breathing sounded loud. I set the stack of photos on my lap and pulled the wool scarf to my chest, the only thing I'd brought back that was still here. The clean smell of wool and the licorice hint from a tea bag clinging to the bag's handle. Those small scents anchored me, kept me from being swept away by panic. In my head, memories ran in reverse. The nights I worked the sewing machine until my calves went numb. The day I took off my wedding ring, wrapped it in a handkerchief, and set it on the pawn shop's glass counter. The moment James draped his graduation gown over my shoulders and laughed, "You're graduating with me, Mom." Each memory flickered on and off like streetlights going dark at dawn. Only today, dawn didn't come. There was only a long afternoon collapsing over me, pressing across my chest. I thought of the police again, a third time, like a drowning person grabbing a torn life preserver. I lifted my phone. The screen reflected my face, a stranger's face warped by tears. My finger hovered over the 9. I inhaled deeply. Then I lowered my hand. I don't know if that choice was a weakness or a strength. I only knew that if I said everything out loud, this wound would be dragged into daylight, and I wasn't ready to look at it under the sun. I hugged the photos to my chest and bent my head low. The tears no longer fell in singles. They broke open, hot, salty, heavy. I cried without making a sound, as if my voice had been taken along with the furniture. After all these years of sacrifice, I thought, this is what I get in return. An empty house, a cold letter, and a betrayal so ruthless it came from my own flesh and blood. Out in the alley, children called to each other. Flip-flops slapped the ground, a bread seller sang out. Life went on, indifferent, as it passed my doorway, and I sat in the echoing room, clutching a handful of photos, the final fragments of a family that had been uprooted, and let my tears do the only work I was still able to do. Wash away the thin dust of 2 short, peaceful days before the real storm of my life. Ever since I came home and found the house stripped bare, I've lived like a stranger inside my own life. No fridge, no proper stove, not even the old armchair to lean back in. Every morning when I open my eyes, my first reflex is still to reach for the fridge door and touch a smooth, cold wall instead. That feeling of emptiness repeats itself over and over, like someone deliberately pressing on a bruise that hasn't healed. If I want to eat anything, I have to buy it the same day. This season, the air is dry, the sun is not harsh, but food spoils quickly. I've gotten used to counting meals coin by coin, a small baguette, a few eggs, a handful of morning glory greens, sometimes a piece of tofu. Meat or fish is a luxury. If I buy it, I have to cook it right away, and if I can't finish it, it goes to waste. And I hate waste so much it makes me feel feverish. One day, I tried buying a small carton of milk, thinking I could drink it all by evening. By night, it had already soured, sharp and foul. I poured it down the sink, watched the white stream disappear, and suddenly found myself wanting to cry. At noon, I quietly wheel my squeaky shopping cart to the alley's end. The vegetable seller always asks, "Mrs. Eleanor, why are you buying so little lately?" "You used to stock up for the week," I smile and patch together a lie. "The fridge broke. I've sent it out for repair." Each time I say it, my throat tightens. The more I repeat it, the smaller I feel, as if I'm signing a confession that I can't even protect the minimum of my own life. Nights are the hardest. Without the TV filling the silence, the house is pitch black and so quiet it's frightening. I hear the wind seeping through the door crack, the old wood creaking, the clock's second hand ticking dryly, each tick like a needle stitching straight into my chest. I fear the dark so much I leave the nightlight on, but its weak yellow glow only stretches the shadow of loneliness farther, never driving it away. Linda, the neighbor, drops by now and then, carrying either a bunch of greens or a few lemons. She stands on the porch, trying to peek inside. "Why don't I hear your TV anymore?" "Are you feeling all right?" I deflect. "I'm fine." The set's broken, they're keeping it to replace the parts. She looks at me a little too long, as if she wants to say something, then lets it go. I know she's kind, but I don't have the courage to tell the humiliating truth. My things weren't stolen by strangers. They were taken by my own son, along with his wife. I struggle to keep sewing because it's my only income, but my hands tremble more than before. Each stitch seems to have a will of its own, veering off the chalk line. My eyes are dim, and tears well up so often that I have to keep taking my glasses off to wipe them. A young customer frowned and returned a dress. "Ma'am, this seam is crooked." "Maybe I should take it somewhere else?" Her calm voice was like a mirror reflecting the brutal truth. I'm sliding downhill. I bent over, apologized, and took the dress back to unpick the seam, each loose thread like another shred of my dignity. On dusky afternoons, I often sit on the floor, leaning against the wall where pictures used to hang. The outlines of the frames are still there, faint squares like scars. I touch them, imagining the landscape painting my husband cherished, the photo of James holding his graduation flowers, my own smile in the self-made wine-colored dress. All gone after just 2 days. I was away. 2 days, enough for someone to uproot an entire life. Memories flood back uninvited. I remember nights hunched over the sewing machine, the yellow lamp flickering, the smell of new fabric, thread, and the glue for hems. I remember my fingers bleeding from needle pricks, wrapping them with tape to finish the batch that was due the next morning. I remember taking my wedding ring to the pawn shop, wrapped in a white handkerchief. The shopkeeper counted bills and muttered, "That's all." I remember my mother's earrings, the only thing she left me, slowly turning into tuition, into dorm fees, into the laptop James needed for his project. I remember the ache mixed with pride as I watched my son in his graduation gown. I'd traded everything I had to buy him a future. At the time, I thought it was worth it. Now, sitting in the empty house, I ask myself, was it? I try not to think about the letter, but each word sticks to my eyelids. Thank you, Mom. You don't need it anymore. A belated wedding gift. Thank you, once the sweetest phrase, has become a slap. You don't need it anymore. A merciless verdict, pushing me aside, turning me into a surplus object, an old shadow whose only job was to provide and then disappear. Sometimes I've picked up the phone and punched in almost all the numbers for the police station. I imagine what I'd say. I've been robbed by my son. By a thief. My throat locks. My hand goes slack. No matter what, he's still James. That name carries the smell of formula and diapers, midnight cries, a warm weight on my chest, and the promise, I'll stay with you forever. I can't drag him into legal trouble. I also can't drag myself into a greater shame by recounting, detail by detail, how my own son cleaned out my home. The days crawl by. I count time by small things. The garbage truck's bell each afternoon, the bread vendor's call at night, the sparrow tapping its beak on the windowsill. I cook vegetable soup with a pinch of salt and eat it with leftover rice. If I still have an egg, I fry it quickly. Meals are so quiet that I can hear the spoon touch the edge of the bowl. After eating, I wash the one bowl I still use, turn it upside down on a towel, and wipe it slowly, as if keeping the last bit of order in the house. Sometimes I force myself to step into the sun, to walk a circle around the neighborhood. I'm afraid that one day, if I don't, my legs will forget how to stand. A few acquaintances greet me. I nod, shaping a careful smile that hides the fact that my pockets hold only a few coins and my home only 4 walls. If anyone asks, "How's James these days?" I answer, "He's busy, always traveling for work." Every sentence is another needle, but this time, the needle pierces my heart. One night, the wind blew hard. The loose window hinge banged against the frame with a dry thud. I startled awake, staggered over to lock it. In that moment, looking out, I saw my own reflection in the glass. A thin woman, hair gray, back bent, eyes hollow, as if drained by a wound that doesn't bleed. I pressed my hand to my chest. There, inside, was a hollow shaped exactly like my son, and the feeling of being abandoned by your own blood. It doesn't just hurt, it cuts, slowly and persistently, like a dull knife sinking deeper each day. I closed the curtain, returned to bed, cradled the few remaining photos, and whispered as if to someone already gone, "If you were still here, maybe things would be different." The wind outside softened. In my breath mixed with the old detergent smell, I heard myself murmur a thin promise. Tomorrow, I'll still get up early, still finish the dress I promised. I'll live one more day, no matter how dark, because no one has the right to strip away my dignity unless I give it up myself. And I closed my eyes, waiting for dawn, as if waiting for one last stitch to pull the torn fabric of my life together. I didn't know that. Just beyond these dark days, another door was slowly opening. But that night, all I had was darkness, the sound of my own heartbeat, and the slow blade of abandonment still working inside my chest. In the days that followed, I lived quietly like a shadow. My sewing work became increasingly difficult with my blurred eyesight and trembling hands. The money I earned was barely enough to eat day by day. I went out less and less, only occasionally to the market for a few cheap items before hurrying back home. Each evening, I sat alone in the empty room, clutching old photographs and listening to the ticking clock, its rhythm a reminder that my time was slowly running out. I had begun to think, perhaps my life would end this way. Poor, lonely, cast aside. Then one morning, when I opened the door, I saw a thick envelope lying on the doorstep, ivory-colored paper with embossed edges, and in the top left corner, the name of a law firm in the city center. My heart tightened. I feared it was a debt notice or a foreclosure order, something I wasn't sure I had the strength to endure. My hand trembled as I opened the envelope. Inside was a long, carefully handwritten letter with a small business card from the attorney tucked inside. But I didn't even glance at the lawyer's name because on the very first line I recognized the handwriting. My heart nearly stopped. Dearest Eleanor, it's Henry. After more than 50 years, I've finally found you. I read that name again and again. Henry, the name I used to whisper in my youth, the name of the first boy I ever loved when I was 17. I had thought it buried deep in the farthest reaches of memory, sealed under decades of hardship. Yet now it was alive again, clear as if it were only yesterday. The letter was long, blue ink on faintly perfumed paper. Henry wrote that he had lived a busy life, becoming a doctor, getting married, and building a stable career. His wife, a kind-hearted woman, had passed away after a long illness. Before she died, she held Henry's hand and told him she knew he still carried in his heart the image of a girl he had never forgotten. I lived with a wonderful wife, Henry wrote, but there has always been a corner of my heart, Eleanor, that belongs to you. After she left, I realized I couldn't bury that memory any longer. I asked a law firm to locate you because I needed to know if you're still alive. And if you are, I want to see you at least once, before it's too late for us. I gripped the letter, tears falling and blurring the ink. It had been so many years since anyone had called my name with such gentleness. In my mind, Henry was still the tall, slender boy with kind brown eyes, strumming his guitar and singing to me under the tree by the schoolyard. We had once dreamed of a home together, but life pulled us apart. I stayed to care for my aging mother, then married and had a child. Henry went away to study, then built his future elsewhere. I had believed we were lost to each other forever, and yet here he was, saying he had never forgotten. He wrote, I've had everything, money, houses, reputation, but every morning when I wake up, I see only an empty room. I wish for someone to sit across from me with a cup of coffee, for someone to hold my hand when the sun goes down. Eleanor, do you still want me to be that person? I ask for nothing more than to take care of you for the rest of our days. If you agree, come to me. I'll be waiting. I set the letter on the table and covered my face, weeping. For so many years, all I had known was bending my back, sacrificing for my son, and enduring humiliation. And now, at an age when life is supposed to be fading, there was a man reaching out, calling me dearest once again. But mingled with my emotion was fear and a gnawing self-consciousness. What did I have left to offer him? I was only an old, poor woman with calloused, trembling hands, disheveled gray hair, a thin body in a worn-out dress. What did I have but an empty house, a few yellowed photos, and a heart already fractured? I asked myself, Henry, if you saw me now, would you be disappointed? Would you recognize the 17-year-old girl in this bent figure? I was afraid his eyes would show pity. I was afraid I was just a beautiful memory, and that reality would be too harsh for him to love again. I picked up the letter once more, reading it from start to finish. Each sentence felt like a warm hand pulling me out of the abyss. I sat by the window, the afternoon light falling across me, faded but gentle. In that moment, for the first time in months, I felt my heart stir. Felt the faint flame inside me still burning. But then, just as quickly, I drew back my hand, like someone who has touched something too precious. I whispered, Henry, I'm not worthy anymore. And yet, deep inside, I knew I longed for one more chance to believe in happiness, even if it came late. I hesitated for days, Henry's letter lay tucked away in the drawer, but every night I would take it out and read it again, the slanted handwriting carrying the warmth of a time long past. At last, after countless sleepless nights, I decided I would meet him. Even if only to say goodbye to the past, I wanted to know whether my heart still had the courage to beat for love once more. I rummaged through my closet and pulled out the old wine-colored dress, the last one I still had from the day James graduated. The fabric was worn, the seams faded, but I carefully pressed it flat, straightened every hem as if I were holding on to the last thread of dignity. I looked at myself in the cracked mirror, an old woman, silver strands scattered through thinning hair, eyes clouded by too many tears. I sighed softly, then whispered to myself, at the very least, this is still me. If he still wants to see me, let him see the real me. That afternoon, I took the bus to the restaurant where Henry had asked to meet. It was an elegant establishment in the city center, with gleaming glass doors and golden lights spilling down onto a red carpet. I froze for a moment at the entrance, my heart hammering, palms slick with sweat. I wondered, am I out of my mind? A poor old woman walking into a place like this? Will people laugh at me? But then I remembered the words in his letter. I'll be waiting. So I drew a deep breath and pushed the door open. The young hostess looked me over from head to toe, surprised for an instant, but as soon as she heard the name Herrera, she smiled politely and led me to a table by the window. My heart thudded harder with each step, and then I saw him. Henry rose the moment I appeared. He wore a sharp gray suit, his white hair neatly combed, his face lined with years. But his eyes, those kind, gentle eyes, still shone exactly as they once did. When his gaze fell on me, his face broke into a radiant, trembling smile. "Eleanor," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Before I could say a word, Henry stepped forward and wrapped me in his arms. That embrace was steady, warm, as if making up for half a century of distance. He leaned close to my ear and murmured, "You're still my Eleanor." I trembled. Tears spilled down, smudging the faint powder I had dabbed on my face before leaving home. In that moment, I wasn't a 67-year-old, poor, discarded woman. I was once again the 17-year-old girl held tightly beneath the schoolyard tree. Henry pulled out a chair and gently guided me to sit. He studied me with such intensity, as though engraving every detail of me into memory. "I've waited too long for this moment," he said. "I was afraid you'd refuse, afraid you wouldn't want to see me again. But you came. Eleanor, that alone gives me more hope than I ever dreamed of." I lowered my head, embarrassed. "Henry, I have nothing left. No beauty, no possessions. I'm just an empty old woman, hands so shaky I can barely sew." Henry shook his head and took my hand firmly in his. "You don't need anything. You are everything I've wished for over 50 years. I have plenty of money, homes, and prestige. But I don't have you, Eleanor. All I want is to make sure you never have to worry again, never have to cry in an empty room. I promise you, I won't let you be alone another day." I choked, words caught in my throat. Inside me, a battle raged, one side full of shame. What place did a poor, frail woman like me have in his world of comfort and success? The other side, a tiny flame rekindling, a longing to be loved after so many years of sacrifice and betrayal. "Henry," I whispered, "I'm afraid I'll only disappoint you. I'm no longer the girl I once was." He smiled softly, his eyes brimming with tenderness. "And I'm no longer the boy I once was. But this heart, it's still the same as the day I first loved you. I'm not looking to relive the past, Eleanor. I want us to write the future together." Tears welled again. I looked at him, his white hair, his tall frame, eyes weary from years yet still shining for me. Suddenly I realized I didn't want to deny myself anymore. I had lost too much, borne too much humiliation from my own son and daughter-in-law. So why not give myself a chance, even if late, to live as a woman worthy of love? I nodded faintly, squeezing his hand. All right. If you mean it, I want to try. I want to believe I can still be happy. Henry's grip tightened, his smile breaking wide, his eyes glistening as though carrying an entire night sky. Eleanor, you'll never regret this. From this day on, I'll be by your side. I won't let you face another lonely day again. My tears fell, but this time they weren't bitter. They were sweet, warm, cleansing, like a stream washing away years of darkness. For the first time in so long, I smiled with a new belief. At last, I had found hope again. The days after that fateful reunion felt like a brand new chapter had opened in my life. I moved in with Henry into his spacious home in the suburbs. The house was surrounded by rose gardens that bloomed all year, with a wooden porch where we could sip coffee in the morning and a wide kitchen whose windows looked out onto the trees. Each morning, I woke not to silence and emptiness, but to the rich aroma of coffee and Henry's warm voice. Eleanor, you're awake? We learned to live again as though we were two young lovers. Some days, Henry insisted on joining me in the kitchen. He fumbled clumsily with the vegetables, his knife strokes uneven, but his eyes sparkled with delight. I laughed. The famous doctor, and yet you chop onions like this? Henry only shrugged, grinning gently. That's why I need you. I can heal bodies, but you're the one who nourishes the soul. Evenings were for strolling in the garden. He told me stories of his years traveling for work, of patients he had treated, of his late wife, the kind, gracious woman who had walked beside him most of his life. I listened with a mixture of tenderness and respect. When it was my turn to speak, I told him about the endless nights hunched over my sewing machine, about the jewelry I had sold piece by piece to pay for James's tuition, about how I had spoiled him as though he were my only treasure in the world. I confessed, through sobs, maybe it was my mother's indulgence that made James weak and selfish, the way he is now. Henry took my hand tightly, his eyes full of compassion. Don't blame yourself, Eleanor. You did everything out of love. It isn't your fault when someone chooses to betray you. You fulfilled your duty as a mother. Now it's time to live for yourself. Those words worked like medicine. Slowly, I felt lighter. The wounds inside no longer bled as fiercely as before. We built a quiet rhythm together, tending the garden, going out for dinner now and then, flipping through old photographs. Henry often studied me closely as though memorizing every wrinkle, every strand of silver hair, before smiling softly and saying, "You've always been my Eleanor, from beginning to end." 6 months passed like the sweetest dream, but one rainy afternoon, the past came knocking at the door. I was mending one of Henry's old shirts when the doorbell rang, sharp and urgent. Henry went to open it, and I followed. What I saw made my breath catch. James. My son stood there, disheveled. His clothes were wrinkled, his eyes ringed with dark circles, and stubble covered his jaw. When he saw me, he broke down in tears, sobbing like a child. "Mom," his voice was hoarse, "Olivia left me. She ran off with another man, taking all the money, even the furniture we had taken from your house. Everything is gone." I froze. Every memory flooded back. The cruel letter, the stripped bare house, the nights I wept over family photos. But instead of screaming or accusing him, I felt an odd calm. James collapsed to the floor, crying uncontrollably. "Mom, I'm sorry. I was blind. I let Olivia lead me. I betrayed you, and now I've lost everything. You're all I have left. Please, forgive me." Tears filled my eyes, but they were no longer the bitter tears of despair. I stepped forward and laid my hand gently on his shoulder. "I forgive you, James. No matter what you've done, You'll always be my son. But," my voice hardened, "I'm no longer here for you to use. I gave my life for you, and you chose to throw it away. Now I must live what remains of mine for myself." James looked up at me, his face streaked with tears, his whole body trembling. "Mom, please don't leave me. I don't know what to do." Henry stepped in then, his hand firm on James's shoulder, his voice steady but resolute. "James, your mother has endured far too much. It's time for you to learn to stand on your own. I can help you find a job and temporary accommodation, but on one condition: you will never again hurt your mother." James was silent for a long moment, then bowed his head, his sobs breaking out anew. I knew this moment would mark a turning point in his life, and for me, it was the first time in decades that I truly felt the right to set boundaries and choose my own happiness. That evening, Henry and I sat together by the window, watching the rain fall softly beyond the porch. He slipped his hand into mine and whispered, "Do you see, Eleanor? You're not alone anymore. You've risen above it, and you deserve peace." I leaned my head on his shoulder, tears streaming freely, tears of release, not of grief. For the first time in a long time, I knew I had found myself again. From this moment on, my son would have to learn how to live as a man, without leaning on the old mother who had once sacrificed everything for him. And as the rain tapered into silence, I felt certain of one thing: life, at last, had given me back my dignity, and Henry, with his steady love, had given me the courage to hold on to it. Our wedding took place on a clear, gentle morning, right in the little garden behind Henry's home. There was no grand orchestra, no glittering wedding gown or lavish guests, only a few old friends, familiar neighbors, a handful of roses, and sunlight spilling across the grass. But to me, it was the most beautiful wedding of my life. I wore a simple turquoise dress Henry had chosen just for me, my silver hair neatly brushed, adorned with a small flower. When Henry took my hand and led me out onto the porch, his eyes shone with a brightness that told me he had waited for this moment for half a century. He whispered, "At last, you're mine." I looked around. In the back row, I saw James. He wore a plain white shirt, his hair freshly cut, his face thinner than before, but his eyes clearer, sincere, and quiet. He looked at me without speaking, but I recognized it in his gaze: regret and relief at seeing his mother finally find true happiness. The ceremony was brief. When the minister asked, "Do you, Henry, take Eleanor to walk with you through the rest of your life?" Henry's grip on my hand tightened, his voice firm and unwavering. "I do, with all my heart." Tears streamed down my face, but this time they were tears of joy. As we exchanged rings, the sound of applause filled the air, and I even caught the soft sigh of release from James. After the wedding, we gathered in the garden for a small meal: bread, wine, and fruit. No one mentioned wealth or poverty. No one spoke of old losses. There was only laughter, conversation, and a gentle peace. At 73, for the first time in my life, I felt seen not only as a mother who had sacrificed herself, but as a woman who deserved love. A few months later, Henry came to me with an idea. "Eleanor, we should do something for women like you, women who were abandoned by family, who thought they were useless. Would you want to start a foundation with me to support them?" My eyes sparkled. I would love that. And so the second home was born, a small but warm-hearted fund to help older women who had nowhere to go, who had been cast aside by their children, or who lived in loneliness. We raised donations, organized gatherings, provided necessities, and helped them rebuild trust in life. I shared my story with them, and many took my hand and wept, as if they saw themselves reflected in me. What surprised me most was James. He asked if he could volunteer. At first, I hesitated, unsure if he was ready, but soon I watched him change, gradually. He delivered packages, helped set up donation events, carried chairs, swept floors, and listened quietly to the stories of the other abandoned mothers. More than once, I caught him bowing his head in silent apology as he heard their pain. I knew he was trying to mend his own mistakes. One afternoon, as we were cleaning up after a gathering, James came to me and whispered, "Mom, I don't deserve you, but I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make you proud. At the very least, let me take care of women like you as a way to make amends." I smiled, taking his hand. "Son, I forgave you long ago. All that matters now is that you live with kindness." Now, each morning, I no longer hear only the lonely tick of a clock. Instead, I hear Henry making coffee, the sparrows chattering in the rose garden, and sometimes James laughing with the volunteers in the yard. The house is no longer a place of emptiness, but a home full of warmth. One autumn evening, I sat in my study with a brand new notebook before me. I wanted to write down my story, not to complain, but to remind myself and to share with other women. I wrote, "Sometimes you have to lose everything to find what is truly worth keeping, and it is never too late to begin again." I set down the pen, closed the notebook, and smiled. From the porch came Henry's voice. "Eleanor, come out here. The moon is beautiful tonight." I smoothed my silver hair and stepped outside. Beside me was the man who had waited half a century for me, and in the house was a son learning how to grow into the man he should have been all along. And I realized that, at last, I was truly happy.